Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well. Well, we are finally back for Rings of Power Season 2. We all knew it was coming, right? And so Ryan and I are here bringing you guys our thoughts. A bit late. I just literally got back from the airport for one of my best friend's weddings. So Ryan and I are here. All 3 episodes, as you mostly would know, were released on August 29th, right? So we've had some binging to do. I had a lot to watch on the airplane. So, Ryan, welcome back, man.
Hey,
thanks for being here.
I am excited to be here talking about this with you again. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always nice talking to you, regardless of the subject matter.
Oh, yeah. Right back at you. Right back at you. I mean, honestly, we could have, recording or not, review or not, we would be talking about this anyway. So I figure we might as well review.
Good point.
Yeah. So I've been trying to think, how should we break this down? Ryan and I were just talking about this of, do we try to go back to the structure we used in season 1 of breakdowns? I say we're just going to go into the good together, and then what we thought wasn't good, and then just kind of overall ratings. Especially since we have 3 episodes to get through tonight. We're just going to shoot these back to back, and then, one will come out after another. So, episode 1. So, Ryan, you brought up the point, just as a quick synopsis. You brought up the point on a recent podcast that, no, they didn't put on their 3 elven rings at the end of season 1. They were there, but they didn't put them on until, obviously, this episode. Right, this episode, it sees Elrond bringing the rings back to Gil-galad. We get some of my boy Círdan the Shipwright in it, playing kind of a pivotal role, them figuring out what to do with the rings. And then ultimately, that episode ending with the rings reversing that elven decay. So let's start off with the good. Ryan, what did you think?
I gotta be honest. It's going to be very difficult for me to separate these episodes out in my mind as I review them, because a lot of things that happened in the first episode I didn't have a strong opinion on until later, and the opinion then worsened, if that makes sense, or sometimes got better. But so I don't think I'm even going to try. I think I'm just going to talk about sitting now after seeing 3 episodes, and I did watch them all today, and going through it. I'm just going to say, what I think about positive now is, again, it's gorgeous. The show is really pretty.
Yes. The visuals and everything like that, I mean, they're almost so pretty that you can tell, a lot of it is fake, but I'll be honest, that's just kind of the fantasy genre on screen as it exists, and Rings of Power, in my mind, is one of the most gorgeous fantasy shows, fantasy things I've ever seen on screen.
Yes, even the scenes where they have to be using CGI don't look... They look decent. So much you'll be watching a TV show. It's very obvious in TV shows, and they'll try to do something that's, beyond their budget or beyond, the realities of creating a set. And you'll know it. Yeah. You'll look at it and you go, that doesn't look great.
Right.
But it really doesn't. It really doesn't. Every prop, even the costumes I think are the weakest, setting piece behind, the actual sets, the actual scenery, and the actual, props and all that. And it's still good. It's still really good. Especially, I noticed the elven gowns, major uptick over season 1. I don't know what they did. I think they just started giving them more, what's the word I'm looking for? Accoutrement.
Yeah.
Give them some more jewelry, give them some more, just making the gowns less than just a colored toga, and they look great.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. I feel like colors always pop. The visuals they're really, really good. I would also say, I don't know, I mean, Linden and all of these, elven lands, they feel elven. I've got maybe a couple things, again, costume-wise, Gil-galad's haircut, where it's you can see where they shaved his sideburns off. I'm that's a little strange. Círdan shaves later on. You see him with some shaving cream, which is episode 2, which is, we'll get into that later. But there are some interesting choices with visuals, but overall, again, visuals are good. I'll even extend that to a lot of the music. Fair to kind of how I had to watch this to prep for the review. I was on an airplane, right, watching this with an AirPod in, so and subtitles on, so I couldn't hear a ton of the music. But from what I did hear, Bear McCreary, right, did an amazing job. And so I mean, if we're continuing to talk about the good things, Ryan, which plot lines kind of stood out to you as good? Because we talked about this in the trailer reviews. It seems like there are some plot lines, like the closer they are to the Rings of Power and the elves, the better they're going to be. The further away from those things, I feel like the worse they're going to be. And from what I can tell so far, that's going to be a correct theory going forward from this review.
I would agree, with the caveat being that they are closing sort of the door on this elven golden tree situation. Kind of ends in season 1. I only say kind of because it's a major plot point still, and I'm sure it's going to come up again, but it's like that was like the dumbest, the single dumbest plot point in the show, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that in the cons. But removing that, you're kind of right. I think that the elven characters, the way that they interact with each other, the settings, obviously, everything's nice. It's easily better than the others.
Yeah.
We didn't get any dwarf in episode 1. I do know that. No dwarf stuff. And no Numenor stuff. So really it was elves, Mordor, and Stranger. And compared to the other two, you're right. Elves were definitely the strong point. The Mordor plotline had some issues. It was interesting. We have Adar, major antagonist to the series, not only got recast, but also shown in a lot different lights. We got to know a lot more about his background instead of him just being a weird evil guy. Now we know kind of who he is, sort of. Not his origins or anything, but we know his relationship to Sauron. We know a lot more about Sauron. The first half of the episode was doing Sauron backstory, basically. And I'm going to talk more about that later. But
I concur. Yeah. And some of the elves, right? Like again, if those were our 3 plot lines, elves I think were mostly great. Círdan, for what the source material is, right? So the fact that, okay, we have this curse in Rings of Power, but not in the source material. Like, Círdan is as much Círdan in this as I feel like he is in the source material until maybe the end, where the rings are like making him have this change of heart.
Yes, you're all of a sudden, absolutely right. Círdan, the moment he appears on screen, and for that first conversation with Elrond was awesome. And I was like, this is what we're looking for. This makes sense. Yeah. Just a small caveat to that. I thought it was hilarious. Elrond's like, I need to go and talk to the oldest and wisest of all elves, which is true. That is Círdan. You know who the second oldest and wisest elf is in this entire scene? The person that nobody likes or listens to. Galadriel.
Oh, we'll get into that. That's actually one of the biggest cons of the Elven plot point. We'll get there for sure. Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean,
I know. Yeah. I'm like, it sounds like I'm trying to like lead us into the negatives, and I promise, like, for the people who are like waiting on bated breath, Royan kind of was a lot less angry about season 1. We'll see. It's just this first episode, guys. It makes me so mad. I thought episodes 2 and 3 were better. We'll talk more about them. But man, I thought episode 1 was such a drag.
I think just to mention that quickly, I thought this was the middle episode. I thought 3 was pretty rough, but we'll get into that. I will say, like, the fact that they're going to try to complicate Sauron is interesting, but I need more. So the lack of a timeline in the show kills me, and I'm not saying you need it to be exact, but the fact I was like, this was before Rings of Power season 1. However, how much longer before was Sauron's supposed death when he becomes Venom? Like,
there's a lot that goes on here, right? Okay, because at the start they're like the dawn of the Second Age. I was like, all right, sure, I can sort of see this feasibly occurring. But then,
which was
later,
a couple hundred years
like
ago?
in episode 3 or maybe 2. It's like, well, first they make that scene like Sauron, like he got right. He got, spoiler alert, he got stabbed by a bunch of orcs and he had to become venom, and then he ate somebody and became a person again. Like they make that seem like that was maybe a year before he meets Galadriel on the ship. He's still talking to the same dude who's like trying to turn him good on the ship, right? He's still, that's the same guy. So the time when Sauron ate that woman and the time when Sauron met Galadriel could not have been like more than a couple years apart at the longest. But then at the same time, it's like, so that kind of indicates that this is pretty, like the Second Age really isn't that long, perhaps, unless the only caveat is like, how long did it take Venom, the Venom Sauron to like coalesce into a being? I don't have that answer, but
I didn't even think about
there's
that.
It
does feel like
there's a lot of orcs talking to Adar like they remember Sauron, not just that they've heard about Sauron, but they remember him. So I'm like, is all of the Second Age so far in the lifespan of one orc? That doesn't make sense, especially because later
there's a baby orc
is like, yo, look at this. First Age vintage, bro. I've been saving this one. I'm
saving
like,
this?
What? How long ago was the First Age?
I mentioned the baby orc too because, well, okay, if there's a baby orc in episode 3, which we'll get into again, but they meant, they have this baby orc there, and I'm like, okay, so they have normal lifespans. What are their lifespans? Does this baby, like, was this baby orc around? Were his parents around when Sauron was killed, quote unquote? I didn't even realize, you're totally right, that that they lead so well into season 1 that Sauron's death could have totally been 20 minutes before season 1, pretty much, like a year, right?
Or less.
Oh my gosh, a year or less, absolutely. Because how long did that Venom thing just ride down the mountain? Like,
I don't have the answers.
How long did that take?
It's possible. It's almost like a Gollum situation. This is like the big thing. It's like, it's possible that there's a Gollum situation going on, that that he was like dripping down into that mountain cavern waiting for a rat to come by to eat for centuries. I doubt it though, because all the orcs talk about Sauron like, at worst, he was just somebody that they met, that they remembered from, like maybe their dad met him or something like that. None of them are like, yo, Adar, this Sauron guy, like, I've heard about him, but who is he? They're all like, bro, is Sauron really back? Like, is that real? I'll be honest. I think, like, okay, are there some good things about this episode? Yes, and I think to kind of wrap that up and jump, because we're already starting to kind of get into the criticisms. It's going to be so hard to differentiate,
it's gonna be tough.
Episode by episode.
I will say that episode 1 ending with the creation of the Forge, Círdan and the elves, I think, are done pretty well. Gil-galad's song, right? That was like mourning the end of the elven time in Middle-earth. Cool. But to be honest, Ryan, like, that's kind of where the good stuff ends for this episode, because we didn't mention much about the Strangers plotline. The Strangers plotline is horrible. Like, it has no direction, and then we get Poppy back, and then they're just lifting lines right out of like Two Towers. Let's face it, we're lost. And I'm like, oh, okay, right, like, you're just trying to force that this is Middle Earth back onto me, versus making me feel it. You're just shoving it right down, right? Because like I said in season 1, it feels like some of this stuff is a caricature of Tolkien, not Tolkien. And I will say this feels like it too, right? So to get back to some of the stuff you mentioned earlier, right? Galadriel being the second oldest and wisest being in Middle Earth as an elf, you don't get that feeling. Every single person on screen always talks down to her. And it's like they kind of have a reason to, because she did something kind of dumb with the Sauron thing. But everybody's talking down to her, including, her great-great-nephew, the king, Gil-galad, who has no charisma. He's back to, being the Wendy's manager,
here
bro.
In my notes that Gil-galad exists just to be an ass. Like, that's all he does in this show.
100%.
He comes up with no ideas. He comes up with no plans. All he does is talk down to either Galadriel or Elrond given the scene.
Yep. Dang, and that's another thing. So I have it written in my notes. If these were not Tolkien characters, their antics would be kind of funny. Like Elrond hiding for no reason. Like he was like playing keep away with the rings, and then he just like jumps off of a waterfall. I'm like,
what's going on?
Like,
bro?
and no, almost no explanation. Otherwise, other than he's evil. And like, see, Halbrand, he's Sauron, which gets to why we'll bring that back in episode 3 of why actually it occurred to me during episode 3 of how bad the Elven plotline actually could be based on. I mean, these characters know this dude is Sauron. I didn't expect Galadriel to come out and say it, but the fact that she had to be like, it had to be pulled from her, that information.
Exactly.
That's like,
right. This is
the great
big
enemy
problem with Galadriel is because she's like, she is a good warrior, but they just make her so like childish. I don't understand why she's so afraid, because it's not just the Sauron thing. It's everything. It's like, even with the dreams that she's been having with the ring, it's like, you know, she's dozing off in a meeting. She's so against the idea that she could have done something wrong ever that she just tries to hide it and always fails. Everyone always sees through it. So it's not even like an interesting plot device. All it does is make her look more like an idiot. And then it just justifies the way that everybody just talks down to her. But I hate it so much.
She is the daughter, right, of Finarfin. Like, she is the granddaughter of Finwë, one of the first elves ever, the first king of the Noldor, right? And she's getting talked to like she's just an up-and-coming child who needs to know better, who needs to learn. And I hate that, because, again, it's like, if these weren't Tolkien characters, fine, whatever. But they are. You're calling them Gil-galad, you're calling them Galadriel and Elrond, but they're not acting at all like their source counterparts, or even sometimes like they're written to be. We are told that Galadriel is amazing and great and worthy of respect and recognition.
But we're never
shown
see it.
that. Yeah, we're never shown why, really. And same with Gil-galad, dude. If I had to serve Gil-galad, I would also be like Amdir and be like, yeah, no, this High King isn't it for me. I'm going to go do my own thing in Lothlorien. Like, I wouldn't follow Gil-galad.
Every single elf in the show talks about Gil-galad like he's a manager at a Wendy's. They're all like, yeah, Gil-galad's going to hear about this. Elrond doesn't like Gil-galad, hides from him. Galadriel, constantly an antagonist with... Even Círdan is just like... I have this in my notes here. It's like, Círdan hears Elrond's side of the story, and the wisest and oldest of all elves does not need to hear a counter argument. He's just like, nah, I'm sold. Gets on a boat and leaves because he doesn't care at all about Gil-galad. Like, nobody gives this guy any of their respect, and yet in every scene, they're always staring at him like, that's our king.
That's our guy. Yeah, it's so funny. And Círdan strikes me as like, he's the guy that's been working there for long enough to where he doesn't really have to follow what the manager says, because he's like better than the manager. But as long as he doesn't openly oppose the manager, Círdan's fine. So he goes and does his own thing. It's like, he feels like that employee to me. But like, yeah, Gil-galad just is not inspiring. I'm like, dude, you're claiming to be either the son of Orodreth, who fought alongside Turin Turambar against the dragon Glaurung and stood with Nargothrond, or the son of Fingon, who fought against like Balrogs and died, and all. You're claiming to be this guy, this son of greater kings, and we get this? I don't know. It's bothersome for sure. And again, like, the fact that we are told but not shown these things is a hallmark of kind of weaker writing. And the fact that these characters are rather inconsistent internally with how they're meant to be written, another hallmark of weakness. The fact that characters don't communicate when they should communicate, that's always like a lazy kind of drawback on certain scripts, is when characters that should communicate things don't. Like, that's just lazy writing. That's just lazy writing. And which will come back up in episode 3 for me, because it's just crazy that Galadriel tells some of the most powerful elves in the world, hey, this guy is Sauron. He's the enemy we've been looking for. All right, just send a messenger. Are you kidding me? Like, no, send everything, dude. Send to Aragian and then rally the elves in Aragian. Send everything. It's time to go find this guy and end him. But nope. That would take too much communication.
Like, worse than that. Because at the start of this, it goes back to Galadriel, right? It all starts with Galadriel. She makes this decision at the end of season 1, technically, to be like, I will not tell Celebrimbor or Elrond who Halbrand is. Why? Because I don't want to look like an idiot. And so, guess what happens? Elrond immediately finds out.
Yep.
And then neither of them tell Celebrimbor. They just leave.
Oh, you're making my point. Yeah, dude. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
And this is all like still episode 1 problems for me. It's like Celebrimbor is
right.
And so
they tell him not to trust him, but they don't tell him why.
So using that foundational knowledge, the episode 3 makes more sense to me. It feels less dumb because I've already accepted the stupidity during episode 1.
Interesting.
But
it's fair. It's okay. I was coming at this. We can start to wrap things up. Go to an overall score. I mean, we didn't talk much about the Stranger, but
okay, I have notes about the Stranger. So here's what I want to say. First of all, dude, Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien is the concept, the foundation of like soft magic. It's the quintessential example of magic being used that's not just fireballs and like cracking the earth apart, but not in rock, bro. The Stranger is like just a fount of chaos, and every time he tries to use magic, it's so destructive and crazy. Like. And also, I like that the concept that it's like, hey, you know how wizards, you know how their magic works? It's a staff. I'm like, what? Also, like, why did we bother with such an emotional end or an attempt at an emotional end to the Harfoot season 1? You know, we have Nori saying goodbye to all her people and opening herself up into adventure. And you have such a heartfelt, teary goodbye with her friends. Granted, at the time, I didn't buy it, but I still don't. But still, like, that was the intent. And then immediately they cheapen all of it by just having Poppy trip over the world's most obvious tripwire back into the show. And I'm like, I would be more interested in this if Poppy added something as a character other than just another Nori, because that's all they do. That all they do is just say the same things to each other and then to the Stranger. Technically, Poppy brought a map to help them get to Rune, which brings more questions into this. Why? First of all, nobody likes the introduction of Harfoots into the show. Why do they have a map to Rune in the first place?
Yep.
And why is all of this, the map, the song being a part, all these tying to the Stranger, why is all of that not explored at all in season 1? You know why? It's because they forgot, or they had to give us a reason to care more about these Harfoots because they felt they needed to include them. But no one wants them here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, it's like they have to do something with the plot. I mean, I'm thinking back to season 5 of Game of Thrones when Bran suddenly disappears for one season. Like, you could theoretically do that with the Stranger, where it's like he's going east. Okay, we're not going to address him in season 2 until he becomes relevant again in season 3 or something. They could do that. It's probably not good form to do that.
They want him to be relevant in season 2. All the trailers about him. It's like,
but he's on the other side of the world. It just doesn't. Oh yeah, no, it's fair. Ryan, you've done a good job of pointing out the flaws of it. I mean,
I don't know. It's like everything that could be interesting about the Stranger plotline gets tossed out. And here's my biggest problem with ROP as a whole. I'm going to say it now, and then I'm going to say it again later. It's like, if you want we talk about fan service, all right? There's a lot of times during the first 3 episodes that they throw out a noun of some kind to be like, oh, this one's for the fans. It's like Gil-galad's like, I should send you to the Enten Moors. And I'm like, yeah. I write this down. Enten Moors mentioned? Question mark? Like,
but then it's always like, it never quite forgotten. Fits. Immediately forgotten. Never quite fits because I'm like, you're going to, send her to the land of the trolls? Are you just going to kill her? Like, is that... Like, the only thing they would know about the Ettenmoors is that it's filled with, like, hill trolls and...
the only reason, like, the way to do fan service that's good, the one that's exciting, is when you don't understand what something is at first, or maybe you do, and you see something and you go, oh yeah. What we keep getting in ROP is it's just like we're looking at this character or this scene and going like, what the heck is going on? And then they'll name drop the noun, and I'm always sitting there being left like, wait, this is what that is? This is your interpretation of that?
Yes, I would totally agree. I would say, like, for me as a theme of what I struggle with ROP is it simultaneously tries too hard and not hard enough. It tries too hard to be Lord of the Rings without actually being Lord of the Rings. It tries too hard to have these amazing, wonderful characters and this, like, you can even see it in their promotional stuff. They'll cover whole buildings with, like, Galadriel and stuff with San Diego Comic-Con. They're trying to make it this, like, giant, world-changing material. And it's just not, because Galadriel isn't consistent. Elrond isn't consistent, not only with their source material characters, but with themselves in the show. And then, again, it tries to be this, we're actually going to appeal to the deeper fans who know about Balerion and the Ettenmoors and all of this. We're going to mention it, but it actually, if you know the lore, it won't hit because it doesn't make sense. Or if you don't know the lore, it's just going to pass you by anyway. Like, it fails to appeal to, in my opinion, the hardcore fans that know all the lore, like us, and then fans that are also, which we'll get into with more with episode 2 and 3, but I was watching this with my girlfriend as well, and to see kind of her reaction to certain things was interesting too, because she hasn't thought about Rings of Power since Rings of Power season 1, and so to kind of, it's, and she knows quite a bit about Lord of the Rings as well, but it's just kind of interesting to get these different opinions and to be like, we're not following what's going on here internally or externally from the source material. So I think that's my big thing about Rings of Power. It's simultaneously trying too hard and not hard enough. And so we'll get into it. But all right, Ryan, if we're going into overall scores, you did knock this one down for me. I had this as my middle tier episode of the 3. I knocked it down from a 6 out of 10. I think I'm landing on a 4 out of 10
That's
now.
where I'm
actually
sitting
this
as
is
well. I mean,
this is beneath average.
So for me, just a reminder, for me, a 5 out of 10 is the threshold where I feel like watching it was whether or not it was a waste of my time. Anything below 5, it's like I would rather be doing anything else than this right now.
Yeah.
Higher than a 5, it's like, okay, this is good. Because it's not that hard to impress me when it comes to, or it's not that hard to get my attention, I should say. I've not been like super impressed with a lot of ROP so far, but I have some. The next 2 episodes for me are both over a 5 out of 10. We'll talk more about it, but so I'm sitting at a 4 out of 10. The basic overall, it was an incredibly boring episode, but it's the first episode of the season, so I kind of expected that. But even in the scenes where they're trying to set stuff up, I still don't feel like oh yeah, this looks like it's going to go somewhere I'm interested in. So it's just an uphill battle, and man, did they just instead fall right back down the hill.
I'll give this kind of glimmer of hope that so far I actually do think, based on the 3 episodes overall, which again we'll get into here in just a second in the next videos, I think overall season 2 is better than season 1 so far. It hasn't infuriated me. We'll get there, but it hasn't, for me personally, it hasn't infuriated me to the level that I think by episode 3 or 4 of season 1 had. Like, I'm not super upset. But I agree that I was on a plane, so I didn't have much to do. I was like, Rings of Power's back. It just dropped, earlier on Thursday when I was flying out there. I was like, sweet, let's watch it. But I'll be honest, it dragged on by the time we were finishing it out. Like, I would rather have done other things or had been at my destination doing other things by that point, And so, inconsistencies. We'll get into that, the writing inconsistencies.
Season 2, episode 1 is worse than season 1, episode 1. And I think that was because they knew they needed to, make the first episode interesting of the show. But I agree with your point. I think overall it's better than season 1, and we'll talk more about that next.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Ryan, for joining me. Thank you all for watching. Let us know what you thought of episode 1, start of season 2 here in the comments below. And we'll see you guys for episode 2's breakdown. Thank you to our Volunteer patrons and YouTube members, really fast: Peter Sheppard, John Hume, Rhys Jenkins, Arthur, Merlin, Theodore, Andrew Carlisle, and Zoomi. Thank you all for supporting the channel, allowing us to do these huge breakdowns, because we've got probably another 30-minute episodes coming your way. So, my friends, thank you all so much for joining us on this adventure. Until the next one.